Everything has changed. So we're recording now. Excellent. And I will go ahead and share screen. But we're not looking at my email. If I can, okay, go away. No. Bar is there. Okay. Again, I probably said it in my in the orientation at some point, but it might be 30 on the outside, but on the inside, I'm about 95 when it comes to technology. So, all right. We did do this in person. I don't think we'll go through introductions today, and I think the two of you are already tutoring. Katie is about to get matched, hopefully soon. So, but it might be good just to know if you know the level of English that your folks are at, so I can kind of tailor that a little bit. So Elizabeth, you all are working on stuff, but do you remember what level?
I actually haven't started yet. I'm just waiting to be, there's a potential match and I'm waiting for Jyoti to get back to me
Okay.
to get started.
Okay. All right. Cool. And then Sabira, I think you all ended up at a lower or higher level than we thought. Do you remember?
We ended up at a higher level, and I will get you your book back, but the last 2 weeks we haven't been able to meet.
Okay. That is totally fine. No stress. Okay, great. So we have a mix of different levels. Cool. Then I will go ahead and do a big screen for this part. All right, we can still see everything, correct? Good. All right, I can see you all, so this is great. So we're going to start kind of at a broad level just to help understand a little bit about some of the considerations, some of the things that are going on in the air around you as you're doing tutoring, and some things that are good to think about and from your own experience first. And then we'll kind of zoom in a little bit more on generally what does it look like to be doing some of the tutoring, and then we'll kind of zoom in on some of the different levels of English and how to best program and plan and do some stuff based off of people's different English levels. So the first thing, and this is one thing that we are trying to do a little bit better in our orientation, to build in the expectation of what are we actually expecting you as a tutor. So you all are one little tiny slice of a pie of a much larger pie of experience and folks who are supporting newcomers and resources that are available, as well as one just slice of the pie of their English language learning journey. So to put it into context, if you're matched for 6 months for 1 hour a week, that's 24 hours that you'll be working with somebody. If you extend that to up to a year, which we allow for, then that's 48 hours. And to learn English, generally from the language backgrounds of most of our clients, where they're coming from, the experts estimate it takes about 1,100 hours to actually master English. So it is important. We got Galen coming in, so I'll go ahead and admit him. All right, so it's important to understand that the expectation is not in the very limited amount of time that you all have together to completely master English. The most important thing is to build a solid relationship and build a place of trust. Just wanted to make sure, Galen, can you hear me okay? Did you make it in? I'm gonna hope that you've made it in, and just chime in to say that you're here whenever you get a chance, okay? But I'll keep going. We're just on slide 2, so you haven't missed much. So the most important thing that you can establish is just a place of trust. So for a lot of the folks we are working with, the experiences that they're having of speaking English out and about in the world can be intimidating. It's not always the most user friendly. Most friendliest of places where they are going to be speaking English. So this is a space developing this place of trust and safety where they feel comfortable to be able to build their confidence in speaking English and build their confidence in being able to get out there into the rest of the world. So building an encouraging space is really the most important part. And then helping them move towards the next step. So our goal is not necessarily for you all to even hit certain grammar metrics or vocabulary metrics or anything like this, or even to see folks go from one level of English to the next. But the goal is to try and see specifically what are the goals of the client that you're working with, and see how you can begin to address those in the time that you have in a realistic way that then can also help them get to the next step. So if that's building confidence that they're able to go to an English class, if that's building enough confidence or vocabulary base in order for them to go into a certain particular workplace, if that's just building confidence for them to be at the grocery store or at the doctor's office. There's a lot of specific goals that you might be working on there, but we want to relieve you from some of the pressure that you might feel that you are the sole person that is teaching them English, and you are solely responsible for them to master the English language. So put it all into context as you partake in this. I need to sneeze, excuse me. Oh, I hate when I shouldn't have said it. It wouldn't have happened. I would have sneezed if I didn't have said it. One important thing to think about as you are trying to build a place of safety is think about some of your own experiences where you have been either a non-language speaker in a context that you were. Perhaps you traveled to some place where you didn't speak the language. Perhaps you've learned another language. Perhaps you've been in other contexts where you haven't been able to understand what's going on. So think about some of these experiences and what are the things that helped you? What were the most important things that helped you understand what was going on, even if you couldn't understand the language itself or the words itself? What were some of the context clues? What were some of maybe the body language that you were able to see and understand? What were the things that were misunderstood? Where were the most frustrating points? So think about your own language experience and the journeys that you've been on, and bring that empathy into the space as you tutor with folks. A few things to consider on the cultural consideration side of things. So, and this is fairly wide strokes across the board, but think about how time, pretty much everything is cultural, but particularly time and how folks calendar is extremely cultural. Think about some of the challenges that you might face in scheduling things, or the challenge in understanding. Each culture has a different understanding of what we are meeting at 2 p.m. means. For some cultures, that means that you will be there at 1:45 and you will be ready to go already. For others, that means, you might be a little bit early. Others, it might mean on the dot. Others, it might mean after 5 or 10 minutes. And for others, that might just mean the general afternoon of the day that you're meeting. For other people, it doesn't even mean the day that you're meeting, but generally that time of the week is when you're meeting. So think about that and try and be consistent. And also think about, when you're thinking about these cultural considerations, yes, English language is one of the goals that you're teaching and supporting folks on, but think about some of these other cultural aspects of living and working and being a resident in the United States that you are also kind of building into this. So as we think about time and calendar, try and also teach about, okay, well, from an American understanding of culture and time, this is what it means to meet at 2 p.m. and try to help them understand what that means and what that looks like. Another thing to consider within calendaring is, of course, our calendar we're very used to. It's a relatively Christian calendar in terms of we have Christmas time, we have the school schedule that roughly follows some of the seasons and different things like that. Folks in different cultures have a completely different understanding of what the calendar looks like. So helping folks understand what the calendar, what the rhythms of the year look like here, as well as what it means to kind of calendar within that. Thinking a little bit about culture of hospitality, what does it mean to be a guest or a host in different contexts? What does it mean in the terms of power dynamics when you're going in? So we pretty much ask, obviously we have some virtual opportunities, but for the most part, we're asking folks to go into our clients' homes. So you are being a guest in their home, but there's also kind of a power dynamic of you are a local in a newcomer's home, and what are the dynamics of that? But you're also coming in as in somewhat of a teacher role, not necessarily a role of authority, but what does that mean and how might their hospitality be different? So you don't need to write an essay on what different cultural aspects of hospitality look like, but it's something to think about in a lens to understand that hospitality is really important in every culture, but particularly from where a lot lot of our clients come from, hospitality is a really important aspect of culture. So think about how you are existing in the space, how you're being received, and reading some of the cues there. Along with that, you should consider how you're being dressed. What is the body language that you're conveying and understanding? It might be a good idea. We have a few resources on our website in the resource page, but think about, you know, my client is from Afghanistan. What are some cultural considerations I might be able to see ahead of time to understand how I should dress and how I might use and react within my body. Their history of formal education. We're trying to include this information in our intakes with our clients. We do ask about their formal education. That's something, it's a piece of information we're trying to include to give to our tutors so that they have a better idea. But it's going to be a very different experience for someone who has a bachelor's degree in their country versus someone who only completed 5th grade in their country and went and started working after that. So if you don't have that information on the client and you would like to know that, then please let us know. We do have that information, and it's one of the things that we're trying to include in our little blurb of information about a client when we're looking at a match. But also think about what are the implications around this. So if you are trying to assign homework or practice, and someone hasn't really been in school for a long time, then think about how they might react to that or understand what they really need to do. In a lot of cultures, also homework is not necessarily a thing, particularly for school-age children. So if folks only finished high school, they might not really have an understanding of what homework is, because in a lot of cultures, school stays at school and home is home. Next to consider whether or not they come from an oral or written culture. So this is going to affect we are a very writing-based culture, whether or not we realize or not. We write a lot, and also our oral understanding is through a written context in a lot of different ways. And so our initial reaction if someone's not understanding something is to say, well, let me write it down for you so that you can see it. That might not be the case for someone who's coming from a more oral, expressive culture, which a lot of our clients come from. And then lastly, when it comes to culture, culture is affecting everything, but at the same time, there's a wide swath of personalities that are within each culture. So you can assign a lot of unknown factors to culture. So if you're a bit confused about how a client is acting in some situation, you might say, okay, this might be a cultural difference, but it also could just be someone's personality. So you have shy people and extroverted people in every culture. You have folks that are good around people and like to learn versus those that don't. So just remember that, yes, there's culture, but also people exist as individuals within different cultures. When we talk about telling stories, storytelling is a really important aspect of developing a relationship with someone, and it's also something that's naturally going to happen as you are trying to help folks develop their own vocabulary to be able to tell their story and share their background in English. It's a really important thing. We don't necessarily realize how common that is for us when we meet someone and we just start asking questions about, okay, where'd you grow up? Who are your parents like? All these different background questions. So telling their story can be it's a really important cultural thing for them to learn. And it's one of the most beautiful things that we can do is to be able to give them the tools to tell their story in another language and to help their story be understood in this context so that they can better live life here. However, just to put some caveats on that, as folks are telling their stories, pretty much the majority of our clients have experienced trauma at some point in their journey. Especially for folks who have come through the refugee resettlement process, the qualifications for that process mostly are vulnerability. And so really only the most vulnerable are making it through that process. And so those folks have experienced trauma at some point. So for folks to tell their stories, it can be a very healing experience in a lot of ways for them to be able to know that they're in a safe place, that they can share their story. However, we just ask that when you're going into storytelling to tread very gently, to tread very delicately and compassionately, just because as folks retell their stories, it can re-trigger traumatic experiences that they've had. So just be careful of that. I know that tutors will have a lot of curiosity about, well, how did you get here? And did you live somewhere else before you lived here? as you hear folks' stories and you hear little bits and pieces, it can, our tendency is to want to string everything together in a chronological path and say, okay, so you lived here and you were born here and you went here and you did this and you did this. That's not necessarily how other folks think. And to try and get that many details can be a bit overwhelming for folks, and it can kind of trigger. So just be careful with that as you go through storytelling. And then with all of that, another context clue, right? We're kind of in the cloud area right now. So as you're hearing people's experiences, it's another area to help you think, oh, okay, so they had this experience, or they've lived in this context or this, and this might be affecting why learning this concept is difficult, or why writing is difficult for them, or so on and so forth. So take into account some of these aspects of their story that will help you then better kind of tailor your tutoring to their experience. I will probably not stop it right here. I'll stop at another point kind of midway for questions. But zooming in a little bit more on best practice for just working with the kind of English tutoring, and specifically to start off with, we have a few different pointers for working and interacting with folks who have English as their second language. These are tools that we're trying to better communicate to all of our volunteers, not just our English tutors, because regardless of if you're driving a client to one of our programs or you're working as a tutor, it's really important to have these. So a few tools, and again, some of these things we're probably going to be review and might already be intuitive to you, but good reminders nonetheless. For speaking with non-native speakers, for verbal cues, you want to speak clearly and simply, but you don't want to shout at someone. It is very common for us when we think that someone doesn't understand us, for us to increase our volume and kind of shout at people a little bit. And Americans are pretty naturally already loud as it is. So just be aware of your volume. If someone doesn't look like they're quite understanding you, then just maybe simplify your sentence, or maybe pick out a few key words that you are trying to emphasize that are the points of understanding in that sentence, and then slow down a little bit. We also tend to talk quite fast as Americans, and so just be aware of that. Try to avoid complex tenses. I would have done this if I had not gone to school at this place, and so instead I thought about doing this, but then I did this. We don't necessarily, we're not aware of the complex grammar that we're using all of the time, just because we're used to it. So just try and speak as clearly as possible. Try to avoid different jargon and slang and acronyms. Particularly with acronyms, you can talk about what an acronym is and how we shorten things. That might be a very helpful tool for them to understand that we use acronyms all the time and we just throw them out there, and abbreviations as well. So as you come across, as you speak, and you might find yourself saying things like that are slang or acronyms or abbreviations, do your best to explain those so they might help understand, but also try not to include them as often in your speech. Repeat as necessary. Look for some verbal and kind of cues to see, yes, they're understanding what I'm saying, or no, they're not. And lastly, and always, be patient. Folks, very often when they're learning a language, if you've learned another language, you know this, you are at the beginning, particularly, you are taking what is said, you're translating that into your own language, and then you're thinking in your own language how you're going to respond, and then you're going to translate that back into English. So that process takes time to think through. And so if folks give it another beat or two after you would even think, okay, I've given them a second to think, they should respond now, maybe I should clarify. Give another 2 seconds, and if they still don't seem like they understand, then you can go back to clarify, but be patient with that. And then when it comes to nonverbal cues, become comfortable with silence. We are a culture that really hates silence, and we like to fill that silence as much as we can. So be comfortable with a little bit of silence. Again, you don't want to necessarily leave people hanging, but if you come to a moment where they really don't seem like they're understanding, just give it a few seconds and it might process, but start to become comfortable with silence. Express empathy with your face and your body language. So think about how you can be encouraging of nodding along, of having positive facial expressions, of being very encouraging if they're saying something that is correct, or maybe even you can do it in an opposite way. So if you are not sure what they're saying, you can look a little bit confused of like, what are you trying to say with that? So that they can start to understand what our facial expressions, how they relate back to comprehension, and how we express that verbally as well. So think about that with your body language. At first, you might be using a lot of gestures, you might be using drawings, you might be pointing to things in a magazine or the produce flyer from Aldi or things on your phone to make a point, particularly for folks with low English. And so you might look a little bit silly at first, but that is okay. Eye contact is a very cultural aspect, depending on who you're working with. Generally, at first, if you're interacting with someone, then you might want to avoid a lot of direct eye contact. But as you get to know them a little bit more, you can work towards eye contact. But it's also a bit cultural, and so I would encourage you, if you know specifically kind of the cultural background of the folks that you're working with, to maybe look a little bit and say, how do folks from this culture understand eye contact? Be patient, be appreciative, be thankful. Maintain appropriate proximity as you are comfortable, and see also kind of how the client determines proximity. Some folks, particularly as you get closer, you might find them coming closer and closer to you, and you might have to kind of establish a boundary and say, well, actually in the US, this is a comfortable distance to be. So just go along as you go with that. And then being aware of your dress as well. That's just a good double check as you're going into a client's home of thinking, okay, am I dressed appropriately, depending on the context you might be walking into. A couple of other just best practices and general tips: try and be as flexible and creative as possible. Ask your client how they wish to be referred to. So in a lot of, again, tutoring, a lot of folks might have a very formal understanding of you at first, and they might be uncomfortable calling you maybe by your first name. And so they might refer to, particularly if there's an age difference, and depending on what that age difference is, they might want to call you by your last name with Mr. or Miss. So consider that, and also ask how they would like to be referred to. If there might be another, again, kind of a formality where they might want to be referred to as Mr. or Miss, or they might be okay with their first name as well. Try and set realistic goals based off of their experience. I have something in the middle. There we go. So think about some of the thematic areas that they really are looking to learn, and try and dive deep into what those different areas are. Try and find out what their interests and their priorities are. This also is just a really good relationship building piece to show that you are listening well, that you are taking interest in who they are as a person and what their interests are. But I wouldn't, over the course of 6 months, if you know that they love soccer, try and get to a different level than just talking about soccer every week. Now, some folks would probably be quite happy to talk about soccer every week, but in the US particularly, we need to learn more vocabulary than just talking about soccer. And then lastly, try and inform them of the resources available as needed. Sometimes we tend to overload folks with resources. Us as a team at ReEstablish Richmond can do that quite a lot, because there are a lot of resources out there. And so try and, when they are in need of resources, think very specifically about what is going to be the most helpful and what's going to be the most clear and kind of concise way to connect them with those resources if they're needed. If you need help with that, you're welcome to talk with us about that. It's something, as I said, we're trying to be better as a team, even for ourselves, of how do we specifically kind of curate the resources that are needed for folks. Okay, before I go into some of the kind of specifics of working with different levels of English and how to plan for that, are there any questions or clarifications of anything that I've said so far? Is this sounding correct? Is this sounding like useful information? Is this sounding like, oh, I know all this already? Yeah. Good so far? Okay, great. All right, so we'll have more time for specific questions at the end, also, if you have more of those. But diving down into working with different levels of folks with English. So in general, we talk about, within ESL world, the 4 domains. We have listening, speaking, writing, and reading. So these are the 4 aspects of And you can probably semantically, you can get down and there are different domains, subdomains of all these different things. But in general, these are the 4 different areas of language learning that we talk about. So as you're working with someone, and we try and do in the first initial match meeting with folks, we try and do an English language assessment that our team, our client engagement team, does to get to know where someone might be at some of these different levels, but just so that you understand and can kind of see and understand what these different levels look like in live experience, and particularly when you're trying to understand and gauge how much is someone really understanding or not. So with listening, see and look at their facial expression in there, and even their body language of how they might be. Let's see. I guess we lost Galen and he's back again. Of how someone might be responding to oral cues, of how they're responding to your voice and to conversation. Does it look like that they're understanding? Does it look like you're kind of getting a deer in headlights look? Are they nodding their head? Are they giving any sort of expression that they're understanding? For speaking, think about how much that they're responding in their speaking. For some folks, they might only be comfortable at first to respond with yes or no, or I don't know, or very simple phrases, or are they responding with full sentences? Are they responding in a coherent way? So if you had a question, are they actually responding to the question, or could you tell that they misunderstood the question and they're answering maybe something else that they didn't say? And for both of those, within listening and speaking, those clues that you're going to be looking for, specifically in the first month or 2, are really important clues for you to help understand, okay, their listening really needs to be improved, or their speaking really needs to be improved. And with speaking particularly, a lot of folks will, and we'll talk about this in a second, a lot of folks will be uneven across these different domains. And so they might have really good listening skills, they might have really good comprehension skills, but their speaking might be quite weak. And so again, looking at where their weaknesses and strengths are important. Writing and reading, listening and speaking are honestly where a lot of our clients are looking to improve a lot of their work. Some of our clients are looking to improve their writing or reading for employment or jobs for later on. But in writing, specifically, you can look and see, you know, what are their capabilities of writing? Can they write the alphabet? Check on their capitalization and lowercase of letters. Check on their spelling. What does it look like in terms of how big are they writing across something? And that's handwriting. Now, of course, we live in a very digital age, and so you might want to do some exercises as well to try and see how is their writing on a keyboard. Do they understand how a keyboard works on a phone or on a laptop, and what that might look like? And then reading as well. From the very basics, you can begin to recognize how someone's reading comprehension is. If you give something that has instructions on it, are they able to understand, comprehend, and follow through on those instructions? Are they able to recognize names of things when you point to a word on a page? Are you able to say, okay, this is water bottle, point to the water bottle in the room? When they see water bottle written, can they point it out and say, yes, here's the water bottle? Those are the sort of things that you want to begin to look at. Now, to help you gauge some of this, and I understand this is a very overwhelming slide, but it's a very beautiful slide as well. So Nancy and another one of our volunteers has put this together, and I will send a copy of this to you all at the end of the training so that you can see this. But we have the 4 different domains across the top, and then on the left you have all the different levels to try and see where folks are. So a true beginner has no understanding of any of these, or very, very, very little understanding in all of these. So they might be able to repeat very, very simple phrases that they've heard on a TV show or something, but otherwise you can tell that they really don't have a lot of comprehension within English. We do have a few true beginners that work with as clients with ReEstablish Richmond, but a lot of our folks are going to be from kind of level 1 to 3 that we're working with. Yeah, true beginners are fun to work with because you can see a lot of growth, and you get to kind of go back to kindergarten in a lot of ways to teach the alphabet and numbers and different things like that. But it also can be a challenge as well. So if you need support in those areas, then please let us know. And then you can kind of, again, I'll give you the sheet, but you can start to see the different metrics to be able to understand where somebody might be at different levels. And you can go through all of those for the different levels and kind of see, okay, based off of my experience of working with my clients so far, I can see that they're probably at this level here, at this level here, and so on. Now, just to reiterate, people can be, this is not going to be a straight line across. Very often folks are going to be skewed in one. And this is true for everyone, even for native English speakers as well. Some of us are stronger speakers than we are listeners or readers or writers. So that's okay. And the other thing that we would just encourage you is be aware of what are the goals and improvement is that the client is looking for. Those are goals that we try and set together in the first initial match meeting and kind of during the first month to get to know what are really the goals that someone's looking for. And then do your best. It's going to be difficult. Again, you only have 24 to 48 hours with someone. You might really say, I can tell that they cannot read anything. And I really want them to be able to read something because that's something that's really important. But for them, their speaking is the most important thing, or listening and speaking are the really important things. And that might be because they're planning on getting a job where they don't need to read at all. And what they really need to be able to do is communicate. So you're going to have to release some of the areas of improvement across this in order to focus on other areas. And it also could be the case that someone might be really low in reading and their speaking is actually pretty good, and that's still where they want to do the most improvement, in which case you can incorporate a little bit of reading and writing maybe into your time together during tutoring sessions, but just remember what those goals are. Yeah, this is a very helpful worksheet or just a reference guide. So I'll send this to you afterwards, and you all can look at that with the clients that you're working with. When we're talking about pacing, going in from what I was just saying, so trying to understand the client's levels and then trying to determine the pace. The first 4 weeks, even the first 2 months, really are going to be a lot of trial and error to see what sticks, how are things going, what is too much content for them to try and work with, what is easy for someone to understand, what is not so easy, what the discernment of between what is not easy for someone and what is actually not connecting or helpful can be difficult. So you start to learn that over the first few weeks as you work with someone, but always trying to refer back and understand, okay, based off of this sheet that I just showed you and based off of the different levels where folks are, this is some of the more appropriate content or less appropriate content depending on folks' levels, and that the pace and expectation of how you might be able to get through different material and different kind of plans and everything. The general rule, though, is the lower level somebody is at, the more repetition and interactives they're going to need. So the more you're going to maybe think creatively about, you're going to bring things from your own house and put them down and say, all right, we've got a ball, we've got a piece of paper, we've got all of these different things, and just repeat. As folks are hearing it, as folks are seeing it written down, repetition is really important at that phase. Again, folks could be at a different level within the 4 domains. And then as you start to plan, we don't expect you to be spending hours and hours planning every week. Some intentional time planning every week is really good and really helpful for both you and for the client. So as you're looking at planning, try and have a theme in mind of, we're going to be talking about this area. We're going to be talking about the kitchen today. We're going to be talking about recipes. And I'll have in the next slide or in one of the few slides, we have some examples of themes that you can go through. Think about what is something interactive that you can do that's an activity. Think about maybe having a vocabulary list that's ready to go. And this might just look like on your phone, you've got a list and you've thought through, okay, when we think about sports, let me think about the most important words I can think of in sports, or you can look online and think about that. You can try and set up some set dialogues that you can read through together, or some dialogue scenarios that you might be going through. So someone is at a doctor's office. Generally, there's pretty repetitive conversations that happen at a doctor's office, right? So you can anticipate a little bit of, this is probably what they're going to say to me. Or at the grocery store checkout line, there's pretty much similar things that you're going to have to say at every interaction. So think through some of these maybe dialogue examples that folks are going to be working through, and then work on any questions that they have. So try and have some time to maybe repeat or review what you talked about last time, and then see if they had any questions or clarifications. Or you could just establish a timer for questions in general from the week and say, the first 10 minutes, any question that you have, what did you not understand this week out and about in the world? What was confusing to you? And that might be related to the theme that you're talking about, or it could be completely different. But again, it might just be really useful for them to say, I was at the grocery store and didn't understand this, or I was driving along the road and I was really confused about this. Could you help me with this? Try and be as creative and as practical as possible, and then slow and steady. Let the client set the pace. If you think, if you've been doing the same thing for 3 weeks in a row, you can look at trying to do something different. But again, if you've done it 3 weeks in a row, you try something different, and then you're going to do another, it looks like you're going to be doing another 3 weeks of that, then think about repetition is really important, and you're going at the pace that the client has set. I know it can be frustrating for us, particularly when we know everything. So just try and be as flexible as possible and slow and steady as possible. Here's just a list of some common topics that you can think about. And honestly, depending on who you're working with, this could be all of the content that you need for the entire 6 months, maybe not a full year of tutoring, but 6 months at least. And I'll send these slides to you afterwards so you can look. But these are just some of the things that you would want to maybe walk through, and also some really common topics that are important for them to understand and have the vocabulary sets and have some dialogue set, and some practice in all of these areas. So you could do a week on each of these. Honestly, most of these you could break into a couple of weeks worth of content, probably, if you have different activities to help practice and some different vocabulary on different things. So think through all of these different areas, and then also obviously identify that some of these might be more important than others. For example, if they have multiple kids who are in school and they're really struggling with interacting with teachers or with school administrative staff, then maybe doing school vocabulary is really important. Or they're starting to work a new job or looking to work a new job, and so work vocabulary is really important. And talking about what does it look like to work in a space, again, the list there, what does it mean to be on time, what does it mean to show up looking ready, what does small talk look like in your place of work, and thinking through that. We will say, I will just put a caveat here, is that this is a lot of personal information about someone. We do ask that you hold people's personal information in a very sensitive way. And as you are interacting with someone's life, right? So for example, some of these are more sensitive topics, perhaps in the US, of like money, or with somebody's work, what benefits that they might have. So just be aware of your own boundaries of what you're willing to help with, and then also what is kind of a privacy boundary for the client, and what you're willing to do. You are not meant to be their bank financial advisor. And so if a client comes to you and says, here's my bank statement, or I got this from the bank, I don't know what it is, I don't know what this means. If you are not comfortable with doing that, then absolutely you can say, sorry, I'm not comfortable, or I don't know anything about that. You might need to ask somebody else about that. Or if you are comfortable, one of the things, and we'll talk about this as we go into the different levels, is just trying to discern. We get sent so much content, both the digitally as well as in the mail, and we know as kind of native folks that a lot of it is junk, a lot of it's not important, but sometimes particularly newcomers can be targets of scams. So if you're seeing some things like that, again, it is not your responsibility to completely block them from all scammers and all that different stuff, but to help them to begin to develop the competencies to understand what is the content that they're receiving, and what are the messaging that's coming at them in English, and helping them begin to understand that. It can be a delicate line to walk. If you need help with that, or if you need support with that, then please let us know, and we'll hopefully be able to help kind of parse that out a little bit of the boundaries there. So going into just a few suggestions based off of the different levels. At a very beginner level, again, building relationship and being consistent and showing up and being a safe person to practice with is the most important thing. Focus on speaking and repetition. Always allow opportunities for any questions to come through. You're going to be using translation apps a little bit in the beginning. For beginners, we are more lenient I mean, obviously we're not dictating anything. You can really do whatever you want. However, we are a little bit more lenient at the very beginning, just because it's really difficult when you don't have a common vocabulary base or even a common grammar base to be able to understand. So a translation app it can be really useful to be able to break through and say, this is what you mean by that. But it also can be very challenging because translation apps can only take you but so far. So don't rely too heavily on them, and try and use them only as needed. And also, we tend to think that grammar is the most important thing when learning English to begin with. Grammar certainly is important, and you can build that in slowly as you go. And you might end up with a client that says, I really want to go to school. I really want to learn this, and with grammar. Then, of course, you can work through grammar on the website. There are different ways that you can teach that. However, for most newcomers, grammar is not the most important thing that they're looking for, and it's just beginning to understand what the world around them is looking like. So try not to have just rote grammar lessons that you're working through. Topics to cover, pretty much the same list of the top 10 that I just shared. So some common things like that, and some activities that you might be working with. Think about fill in a missing letter from the alphabet. You could write the alphabet out on a whiteboard and start to erase some of the letters, and then have them replace them if they can. Start to match which one's lowercase, which one's uppercase, where do you use them, and how do you use lowercase and uppercase. You can trace some simple words. You can do some, simple, have them answer the phone, and what do they do when they answer the phone, and then be preparing for some very simple dialogues that they might be experiencing. Some tools, if you're volunteering with us, then we try and give out an Oxford Picture Dictionary if you would like access to one. If you'd like to connect to get one of those, let me know at the end and we can do that. But the picture dictionary at the very beginning is a really useful thing. I will say that the picture dictionary is quite westernized in how it's set out. So be aware that if you open up for a picture of clothing, we might call things, well, that's a shirt, that's a dress, that's a blouse, those are shoes. Folks might have a different understanding that might not be quite the same. So a dress might be called something different in their culture, and so they might still use that word, and so there can be some interpretation issues that go in there. Think about the tech that they're using on their phone, and think about just what are the English cues that they're kind of experiencing around them. Are they watching TV in English? Are they watching YouTube videos in English? What's the English that they're experiencing, and helping to use that? And if you have magazines, I'm not sure if a whole lot of people really read or use magazines anymore, but certainly if you have some, you're welcome to bring those with you, because pictures are really helpful, and some basic words to walk through there. For intermediate level folks, you can start to build in simple grammar context. We encourage, particularly Nancy encourages, that we don't just have folks do rote memorization of grammar lists and verb lists. So just because when was the last time in your adult life that you needed to write out verb charts of I am, you are, he, she, it is, most of it, we use it in context. So it's helpful to know, but in terms of just the rote memorization to be able to fill those out, that's not necessarily something that they're going to need to be doing. Think about some of the most common verbs that are being used and how you can use those in practice and help people learn those. Nancy's a big believer in the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why, helping folks understand what do those different things mean. The 5 W's we use so often we don't even really hear them anymore, but they're so similar, and for non-native English speakers and English learners, they're really difficult to understand what is on the table. And they say Afghanistan, right? Because they think there's just always a confusion because these words are very similar. So try and start to get folks into the rhythm of learning what the who, what, where, when, and why are, and using some exercises around that. Start to emphasize a little bit more on pronunciation practice. When you're working with real beginners, one really helpful tool I didn't mention is repeat back what folks are saying. They might be able to hear once from your mouth, oh, that's not correct. Let me see if I can correct that. Or if you're not quite understanding what someone is saying, think back, read it, speak, repeat back what they said, and then you might be able to begin to hear from your own mouth that you understand a little bit better what they might be trying to communicate to you. But in general, you can try and correct pronunciation at the beginning. But really, once you get into the intermediate level is when you're going to start to want to be doing more pronunciation practice as well as correction. And don't feel bad. This is one of the purposes of why you're there, to help correct people and just say, you pronounce it you say it in a little bit differently. Don't be rude about it, obviously. But it's one of the most important things that folks can do. Obviously, we're not trying to get rid of an accent for folks. So many folks within our community have an accent when they speak English. There's no problem with that. But when it comes to being able to pronounce things more correctly, so that they can be understood, that's what you're really going for, is not trying to say, well, you have to completely get rid of your accent. It just is trying to get it to the point where the word they're saying is better understood, so that someone out and about in the world who doesn't have a whole lot of experience with non-native English speakers will be able to understand it a little bit better and might mitigate some of the frustration and feedback they might get in those contexts. Some other topics to cover at this start to go more in depth on a vocabulary of subjects that are really important to them, thinking about more applied vocabulary in these settings, and real life reading exercises. Some examples: you can help fill in some forms. You can maybe make some sample forms that you're filling out, create some templates that they might be using in a common scenario. So like, if it's still a thing to send in notes for school, I don't know if that's a thing. If kids were out from school, I don't know if everything's digitized now, I don't know. Or emails to teachers, help them, say, Johnny was sick and could not come to school today, and here's the doctor's note that is attached to it. Think about working through some of the simple things that they're going to be needing to use on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. Help them with some basic call and text and how they might be interacting with some folks. Dictate some simple paragraphs. So write it will take you 3 seconds to write a very simple paragraph, and then speak that out and have them write it down, or vice versa, have them read something out, or have them give a short dialogue, tell a very short story, and write down exactly what they're saying, so that they can start to see where maybe their grammar might not be quite as perfect, or where they might mispronounce things. Help them maybe some writing samples for jobs, some very basic things so folks can see that they are able to writing about themselves, digital resources that they're able to use. And then, as we said, when it comes to mail, do your best to still have pretty strong boundaries. If you are not their personal assistant, nor their financial or any other advisor, but just starting to discern, yes, this is just junk mail, or no, this is an important thing that you need to respond to. One tool that Nancy loves to use, ReadWorks. There's a lot of great reading levels that you can download from there. That's a link. Again, I'll send these slides at the end so you can look at that. And then any real life reading materials that you can get your hands on, even things that we might not think are really important, brochures, pamphlets, things that are out and about in the world. Those are just free opportunities to give folks a little bit of practice with English. So, and then finally, for the advanced folks, you can start to work on more advanced grammar practice, both speaking and writing. Work on correct use of the 5 W's in context. So think about some sample job interviews you might be able to do, or some questions that you might be able to work with that. Now, I will say, when it comes to kind of more specialized things, we do have someone on staff who is an employment specialist. We do have someone on staff who is a transportation specialist. So understand what your role is as the English tutor. We're not asking you to be a specialist in any of these different areas. So the lines begin to blur when someone is at an advanced level. And if you feel like you're getting out of your depths when the questions are coming about jobs and employment and different things that are past kind of just common knowledge, basic things that you can help, then please let us know, and we can look about referring them to other resources. Dive into any specific applied areas that they're looking for, and look at some of the resources that are available in the community. Activities, you can leave a voicemail that has some very specific, hey, so sorry to miss you. I was hoping that you could bring your carrot and rice recipe with you, because I really liked it at the last meeting that we were at. So next time we are meeting, can you please bring that recipe and write it down, or something like that. And then you can ask them did you understand that message? What was the action points of that message? How you might transcribe that? different things like that. Again, thinking about what are the most practical things they might come across in their everyday life, and practice everyday conversation that they're going to need, particularly if they're going into a workplace. Think about what might be the cool water cooler talk that they're talking in their workplace and how that might work through. And then any bureaucratic needs. Again, you're not a specialist, but helping them understand some of the processes of the US. There's some tools listed there that are kind of more applied tools. Purdue University, their OWL program has some great resources. There's Grammarly, as well as Betty Azar. Any of her old language books are going to be quite cheap on the internet, but those are great options to use. When it comes to dictionaries, at some point it is good to switch from a bilingual dictionary that just has a word-to-word translation into an English dictionary so they can see really truly what is the context. Because if you just have cats into gato, that tells you something, but it doesn't give you the context of what a cat is. Now, most people know what a cat is, but when it comes to other words, to help them get the other built understanding through what a dictionary has. And then newspapers, libraries, other resources like that. Our last notes before we finish up, we do have in our tutor kit, we do have an Oxford Picture Dictionary, which I have failed to bring one over with me, but in that Oxford Picture Dictionary, it's broken into different sections based off of themes. You have school, you have workplace, you have clothes, grocery store, different things like that. You have different scenarios with pictures that are all labeled within that. At the end of each section, it does have a little dialogue, a little story, some questions that you can use. So there are resources kind of built into it, as well as there's an associated workbook that we always give with it. We don't ask you to really rely super heavily on those. Those are kind of reference materials that you might work through a little bit every week with something, but it is not designed that you go through page by page and week by week through the different areas, but mostly to identify what are the most useful areas and themes to the client that you're working with, and then what are the most useful resources to pull out of that. It might just be one or two exercises or some reading materials or different things like that. In our volunteer portal, just to remind you, we do have the volunteer portal, which I think the next slide shows you where it is. It's on the website, all the way to across the volunteer resources, and the passcode for that is ReEstablish with a capital E. We have a lot of different resources. If you go under English Tutor, we have all of what I've said of the different levels. We have even more resources at all of the different levels of resources that you can use to print outs and suggestions on activities and things to plan for and everything like that. Encourage practice as much as possible, but again, practice is not always going to happen, and be realistic and be flexible with that. It can be frustrating when you have assigned homework and then it doesn't happen, but that is the nature of folks' lives. They're busy. A lot of folks have kids. A lot of folks have a lot of things going on and just don't necessarily have the capacity to do it. Other folks are going to be really, really motivated and will do every bit of homework that you give to them. So it really is going to just depend, but try and keep your expectations realistic. And then lastly, you have me on the volunteer engagement side of things, and we have our whole client engagement team that can help support you as much as we can. We can't always work miracles, and we are pressed for time with a lot of different things, but we can do what we can as much as we can. So please do reach out for us for support if you need support. Yeah, this is just a short video just to show you. Again, you go over to volunteer resources on the website. You scroll down and you'll press on the volunteer portal. It will ask you for the passcode, and it is established, and then you'll see this here. I'm still in the process of rebuilding some of this, so this will change shortly, but there's a lot of great resources that are on there for you all to connect with. All right, are there any questions, clarifications, or things that you all might have specifically, or a specific concern or worry that you might have, and how we might be able to address those? Stop. There. Go for it, Elizabeth.
Well, I'm just wondering if you and your student are both willing and able to meet like twice a week. Is that okay? Or do we really need to, because it is hard to learn a language, just with a 1 hour a week. I mean, if that comes up and it's doable for everybody, is that okay? Or is it really, more strict that we just keep to the,
it is up to you and your capacity. So we're pretty clear that we ask for 1 hour a week for 6 months. Now there are some volunteers who, very few, but a few will meet twice a week. Some will meet for an hour and a half because they feel like an hour isn't enough time, because usually you might start a little bit late and it takes a while to get into it and all that different stuff. But our ask, just because we know that everyone's time is very limited, is for 1 hour a week. So you are more than welcome to do more than that, but that is kind of your own volition and on your own time. One, two, we can do some limited, because we ask for either 6 months and then you can extend for up to a year. So you might say, well, actually, I can't commit to a year, but I might rather do 2 times a week for just 6 months, and then you can end it and we can kind of count it as such. That's also fine. Yeah, but we will just say that we can support you as much as possible. But once you start to set expectations of we're going to meet twice a week, if you go back on that, then that can just be can sometimes be tough for the client. And particularly as we're trying to establish routine and kind of spaces of trust, we bless that. You're certainly welcome to do that. That's amazing. And as you said, it is objectively better for language learning to have more frequency, because 1 time a week is you forget a lot in a week. But if you run into issues, we have less capacity to be able to do that, just because so okay. Yes, but with a big asterisk on it. Yeah. Any other questions or clarifications or anything to go for? I will say, so Katie, just because I know that you're doing virtual, we'll be doing virtual tutoring. Virtual tutoring is a bit of a beast of its own, and you really do have to think of a lot of creativity, particularly at lower levels of English, because when you're doing things to begin with, it's so much easier to have the tactile of, that is a banana. I'm pointing at the banana and not something else. So you really do have to have a lot of patience, a lot of flexibility, and it just will take a little bit more energy to think through. But you can think creatively about how you can share your screen and point to different things on the screen with the mouse and different things like that. It is important to understand, though, what technology your client is using. So if they're viewing things on their phone, if they're holding their phone up, then what might connect or not connect based off of how big their screen is. If they're on a laptop, maybe things are a little bit easier. But anyways, those are just a few caveats. But I will say, and we have a ton of resources now on the website about virtual tutoring, just because during COVID, obviously that was the topic of the day, is how to do everything online. So we do have a number of videos on some best practices for online tutoring and stuff like that you can look at. But any other questions or concerns? I'm also happy to stay on afterwards if there's something kind of one-to-one you would like to ask. All right, so I'm going to go ahead.